is perfect. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Welcome, welcome. This is Offstage. I am Ward Anderson. I'm so excited to have the guests I have today. Today, we're going to be talking about political correctness, a topic that comes up all the time, it seems, in the media and especially in entertainment. Whether it's real or not, we're going to get to in a minute. But I am so happy to have the guests that I do. He is a Canadian comedy legend who has appeared all over television and all over the world. Please welcome Mike MacDonald. Let's do it. She is the better half of the Ward and Al talk radio show on SiriusXM satellite radio. She also hosts her own podcast, Digging In with Allison Dore, the person I look up to every single day, Allison Dore. He is no stranger to touring the world. He has appeared in almost every major North American comedy festival there is.
Mike again?
That's Greg Morton. Greg Morton. And Dave Martin.
All right. Okay. Good night, everybody.
A veteran stand-up comedian, a excellent radio broadcaster, and a dear friend. Thank you for being here, Dave. Thank you very much. Guys, I'm happy to have each of you here. This is a topic that I've loved talking about because it's one that wasn't common just 10 years ago. It's a term, the term political correctness has been around now for about 35, 40 years in the public vernacular, right? And yet, I feel that I didn't hear it on a constant basis until about 10 years ago. Now I feel like I hear it all the time. I have said on numerous occasions that I actually think it's a myth. Because for something to be politically correct, that means that someone's politics have to be represented, right? And if everybody on every side of the political spectrum, whether it's left or right, no matter what side of the fence it is, takes offense at something, then that means everyone's politics are at some point being offended. So then who's political is politically incorrect, right? And so that's why I say, I think it's a myth. I think society norms change all the time, and some people just have a hard time accepting that. What do you think?
You know what? I think it's people are kind of they've gotten a little soft lately. Don't you think so?
Do you think so?
I think so.
But you know what? Have they, or do we just hear about it more?
Well, I think we hear about it more, and I mean, I remember first hearing the term political correctness sort of the early mid '90s. I mean, Bill Maher had his show Politically Incorrect, and then, but there's been a really big
and the whole
resurgence of it.
The whole idea of that show, which was a similar format to this, was supposed to be talking about things that are taboo for network television at the time.
Yeah.
Right.
And but I mean, there's been a brand new wave of it. I don't know how that brand new wave of political correctness has started or where it came about. But I mean, I read that, I heard or read, it doesn't really matter. But but if you replace the term politically correct with treating people with respect, it comes across in a different sort of way. I mean, there's different levels, I suppose, of politically incorrectness. But I just like the idea of just that. I think it's a lot of the people that get really upset about political correctness are a lot of people that just don't want to accept that they're getting older and the world might be changing a little bit.
White people.
Well, yeah, I guess. Or people that have gotten away with...
That was funny to me.
People that have gotten away with... Basically, people that have had a lifetime of getting away with shit, and then now all of a sudden, what? Now I can't say the stuff that I used to say 20 years ago? That's offensive to people? But I want to keep saying it.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't want to grow old.
Let's ask somebody who used to say different shit 20 years ago. I mean, I remember one of the first times I saw you on television was talking about your parents beating you when you were a child.
Yeah.
Right? And
the fact that if we had the laws back then that we have now, my parents would just be coming up for parole. Yeah. I think with the political correctness, it's, I think what we're hearing now is the left and the right, the fanatics, the crazy people, the reasonable people in the middle of having to put up with it. I think, to me, politically correct, it's not a burden to refer to people how they want to be referred to. That's not a burden for me to do that. but I think it can get overboard. Like, for example, vagina willows. That's going a little too far with the,
A person-hole cover.
Yeah, you can't.
Person-hole
my
cover.
God, I just got it.
I
I was like, what are you talking about?
The only person it applied to here.
Did not. I was like, willows. What does that have to do with
pussy
that's-
willows.
Yeah,
What?
I
Vagina willows.
didn't get it.
Vagina holes, I was like, isn't that the same thing? Is that two?
What I always say when people talk about political correctness, they go, oh, everything's going to become so political correct. I go, do you know who doesn't believe in political correctness? The Dixie Chicks.
Right.
Because so often now when I hear people complaining about political correctness, I go, they're using that term in place of the word liberal. Because what they want to say is liberalism has gotten too much. You know, liberals are bitching about this or that. But I go, but that wasn't who ruined the Dixie Chicks. The Dixie Chicks said something against what was then the popular administration in the United States. It made them pariahs. It made them outcasts. And those very same people who now sit there and say, oh my God, political correctness is out of hand, went, how dare you say those things about the president, shut up and sing. And I go, so then if political correctness is a thing, who was being politically correct then? Wasn't it the people that were politically in power? So in that case, that's why I say it can't really be a thing. If we go left and right, back and forth, and everyone gets offended, then is it really even a thing?
It's not used correctly. The term's not used correctly. And I think when it comes to comedy, it is very much I used to be able to say certain things and now I can't, right? Because whenever people go, well, there are things you can't joke about. Well, of course you can joke about them. People might not laugh. People, the audience might get mad. You might have someone stand up and go, that's not funny. But you can make whatever joke you want to make. So whenever people are like, you can't say anything anymore because it's a PC, it's like, no, you can say whatever you want. But someone might walk up to you and go, by the way, I think you're a racist. Bye. So what's the point? What jokes can't we make right now? With the exception of, obviously in Canada right now, you cannot specifically target one kid with one specific disease. Other than that, other than Petite Jeremy, who are we not allowed to make fun of?
For those that don't know what Allison Dore is referencing, there was a huge lawsuit in Canada where a comedian made fun of one specific person with a disability and was found guilty in front of the Human Rights Tribunal for making fun of that one person. But, there's always going to be an exception to the rule, and that's what I would see that as. And I think most
No, for sure. That's an anomaly.
Yeah.
And other than that, you can joke about anything you want.
And you should be able to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think-
But
I think
it's
you
going to go
can.
by the audience. So listen, like Seinfeld wants to complain about college kid said I couldn't say this word, and everyone's sensitive, everyone wants a safe space. And it's like, here's the thing. At the end of the day, as a comedian, if you're going out there to tell a joke and the audience doesn't laugh, well, you don't get to start going, no, it's because you're too sensitive. Well, then quit. Or write a joke that makes them laugh. Like, what do you...
Or
do you want?
you can write a joke and try to make the same point, but not
Find a better way.
Find a better way to do
Find a
it.
better
I mean,
way.
everything is open to be made fun of. It's just a matter of how you execute it.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with you in one sense, but I gotta say, the audience shouldn't be allowed to bring their office to your office. And the stage is our office. Now, if they bring their office rules and we have to conform to them, nothing's gonna be funny.
Oh, so you don't do corporates?
No, but you know what I'm saying, right?
Well, I do and I don't. Like, what do you mean? Because how do they bring their office rules?
Their office rules, well, things that you couldn't say at the office.
Right.
You shouldn't be allowed to say that on stage.
Yeah.
Basically, they try to get you to conform to their rules.
They bring
But
their
how-
expectations into the club and
Exactly.
expect you to know them in advance.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's no
Okay.
human resource department for comedians. No one's gonna, other than the audience. I mean, but it's one of those weird things when someone will make a joke and someone will say, "Hey, that's not funny," and then you can turn around and go, "Yeah, but well, that whole audience laughed." But there might be the chance that the whole audience is racist, and so if you're playing to all racists, they would love that joke too. But it's
But
a
I've
very
had
blurred
that
thing.
happen to me before, where I was cornered by this teacher, and she was telling me about like I didn't really find it funny, and I said, well, listen, that's your right, but like everybody else did.
Yeah.
But here's my question. So why does that one teacher matter? Like, she can come in and with her office rules, but everyone else laughed, so she's outvoted. Right? So it's like,
I've always said that a comedy club is the last true democracy there is.
Be. Yeah.
Majority rules. If you're not the majority, then you lose.
Yeah.
So if, like, the way I look at it is, if you do a joke and literally no one laughs, well, then the joke's not working. And so whether it's because they're too politically correct or they brought in their own ideals or whatever, it doesn't really matter why. The point is nobody laughed. If most people laugh and one person didn't, and they come up to you afterwards and go, that wasn't funny, then you go, well, it's too bad for you.
I agree with Allison saying about the responsibility a comedian has to take for doing the material that they do. But what I don't agree is the people that are offended trying to stop that person from making a living.
Yeah.
If you don't want to see him, fine. Nobody's forced to buy a ticket. And if the comedian advertise, like there's plenty of shows now that say XXX. If you're offended by anything, do not come. People still come, and they still get offended. Tough luck.
Yeah.
But if you're at a function, like the thing that happened with Wanda Sykes, she made those jokes about Trump and she got backlash. Well, it wasn't her crowd. Like people were saying, well, how could people that would go to see her be upset about it? It wasn't her crowd. It was a fundraiser. So there's different responsibilities. Like when we're doing a corp gig, there's no jokes about the company, this and that. Yeah. They can lay down the rules, and we say okay to that because they pay us better than normal gigs. But like you said, like in the comedy club, that's the last free. I believe in freedom, like the Mike Ward thing. I didn't agree with the joke.
Mike Ward being the comedian who was found guilty for making fun of the kid with the disability.
I don't think it's an extremely funny joke to begin with, but we don't get to choose what's going to be the precedent case for freedom of speech fighting. Yeah. So we have to back them and say, we should have the right to say anything. And you have the right to be offended, and you have the right to ask for your money back. You have the right not to go to that show. But I don't think you have the right to protest this person coming in. Like there's a lot of comedians that can't play certain campuses because the campus says, we don't want that guy here.
Is that you, Morton?
Yeah, that's me, man. That's been me. But you know what? Before we get into that, before we get into the outrage and how that has changed over the years, let me talk for a second about comedians and their outrage when it comes to this. Because what I notice is that we comedians are really selective about our freedom of speech on that stage. Because I will notice that a comedian will go, I got the right to say whatever the hell I want on that stage. I'll say, I believe in my freedom, don't censor me. But that right-paying corporate gig comes along and goes, we're going to need you to not say this, that, this, and that, and change your entire act. And that same comedian goes, yeah, all right, I can do. You and I worked together in Montreal 10 years ago on a corporate gig for a Jewish fundraiser. And I remember both of us suddenly having our acts slashed in half.
Yes.
Before the gig, and it wasn't even offensive stuff. It was just, you're not going to do this, you're not going to do that, you're not going to. So for all the talk of freedom of speech, we both went, okay, the check still cleared, right? It's funny how we pick and choose our First Amendment battles depending on whether or not the money is
But there's a difference between if you're willing to do this, I will pay you X amount of dollars, and oh no, you don't get any money and I tell you what to say, right? So it's not a freedom of speech issue when someone says, listen, if you cut all this stuff out, I'll give you this gig for $1,000 or whatever. And you say, yeah, I can do that. Yeah. Because that's being given a choice. So there's a difference between being given a choice and being censored.
Yeah, but I still think the comedians bitch way more about restrictions in a comedy club than they do when that's a corporate or cruise ship check.
Well, because comedy clubs are paying you crap.
Well, but also at the end of the day, the comedy club is owned by one guy, and if that one guy doesn't like your act, and if he sees it once, it's his right to fire you. It's sort of like when people go, on Twitter I can say whatever I want. Well, Twitter's owned by a company, and if they don't like you, they don't have to give you that voice either. Same thing with Facebook. Or the only real freedom of speech that someone has is going out on a street corner and then just screaming stuff out into the open air. That's the only unaccountable place. But again, when
something I've said before, when people always say that whatever happened to freedom of speech, I go, You have every right to walk out on the street
Yeah.
and say whatever the hell you want and
Yell
not be
some-
prosecuted for it. You don't have the right to a network sitcom because you did.
You know, and having freedom of speech doesn't mean you have consequence-free speech.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
of course not.
So yeah, you can say whatever you want, but then I get to respond.
Right.
Right.
I get to reply.
I think
also-
also with the political correctness, there's a responsibility to the community to write better material. For example, that joke that was used at the very beginning with the political correctness about campus, Jerry Seinfeld's joke about the gay French king, the way
Yes.
they're going
Well,
through the face.
what the joke is Jerry Seinfeld had made a joke about something looking gay. Was that
It
it?
was like the
Or-
outfits,
no,
the French
it
king.
was streaming through Facebook, going, like a gay French king.
Right.
You don't
and
need-
someone said, "Why is it gay?"
Yeah,
It's-
you don't need to say gay. You could say effeminate.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or just
Yeah.
French king, and the joke would still play. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's sometimes I think it's the comedians being lazy. They don't want to
Yeah.
write better formulated jokes. You know.
That's
Societal norms do change, though. I talked about on another episode of this show about how growing up, I mean, you and I are around the same age, and growing up, that the joke, if you watch a John Hughes movie, which is an innocent film, these PG-rated, innocent, family-friendly films, when boys teased each other, they called each other fag. This was the joke.
Well,
You
16
call each
can-
other,
yeah.
16 Candles is calling people faggot or fag throughout the whole thing. It's
Teen
just
Wolf.
not something you do now. Teen Wolf is a Michael J. Fox family-friendly movie with two characters going, "Are you a fag? I'm not a fag," for a whole scene. And I said, then you have someone like my wife, who is a decade younger than I am, who grew up completely different. You would never make a joke
Right.
like that, and now we've moved on past that. There are people that would say that's political correctness, when in fact it's just societal norms have changed. You just don't
Right.
talk that way anymore. It's
Right.
just not a joke.
And
people
it's not a
make.
burden to keep up with that. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And also, I really believe, like, a lot of times at corporate gigs they say, don't talk about this, don't talk about that. But I go out and talk about it anyways because I approach it from the right angle. Like, for example, I would love to have a joke in my act about AIDS if I could find a good punchline, which would be the fact that the pharmaceutical companies don't share their information because everybody wants to invent the pill that would people have to take for the rest of their lives to
Yeah.
cure. You know what I mean? So if somebody said, "Don't do any AIDS joke," I know what you're saying. I'm not going to go out there and say, they brought it on themselves.
Right.
You know.
But you know, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, a lot of times when people do get offended at things, or they go to X-rated shows and they're suddenly, I can't believe I'm offended. But a lot of people just don't want to be accountable for the things that they go and see. It's sort of like, it's like going to see a violent movie and then getting upset that it's violent. Well, clearly it was rated this and this and this. You could have checked that out before you went in.
Right.
But people
Never
like that don't.
underestimate people's ability
Oh, yeah.
to not inform themselves of something
Right.
in advance.
Always.
Well, and I can't stand this that when like a secret tape will come out of someone and they're saying a bunch of horrible stuff, but if it's stuff that you're never supposed to hear, it's sort of like sneaking into someone's room, looking in their diary that you're not supposed to see, and then all of a sudden you're offended at it. And it's sort of like, well, you weren't supposed to see that in the first place. No one was supposed to see that, and then now you can't be necessarily. I mean, if someone's saying
What are you
on
trying to tell
open
us about
stage,
you, Dave?
well, here's a long list of things that.
There's a huge.
There's some tapes out
yeah.
there, is what I'm saying.
There's a huge difference, and I was saying to Greg earlier that the jokes that we joke about, if the public heard them, they would be off. But the key thing is, we joke about it because we make fun of it. But the people that are revealed that that's the way they really are, they really do believe
Yeah,
in
sure.
racism, xenophobia, homophobia, all that stuff.
But do you think that's because we know where our heart is? Like you can go like, well, I know Mike, he's not a racist.
Well, yeah.
So
I mean,
obviously,
I
you
mean,
know.
it's for comedians. We have the curse of knowing every joke out there to begin with. So it's only the dark stuff that really gets us excited because it's
Right.
stuff we haven't heard.
Well, it's
We've
in-
heard every normal joke. So it's like a magician pulling out a rabbit. You go, anybody can do that. You got to pull out something fantastic for other
That's
comedians
fair.
to go, okay.
That's
I
fair.
I
agree.
mean, but
I agree.
God forbid the public should hear that. But if there's a
I think,
show,
well, I think comedians also, not just they want to hear something they haven't heard before. There is a badge of honor when you can shock a fellow comedian.
Well, yeah.
I mean, there is.
Well, and we try to make a joke out of everything. So it's like we get to a point where we're desensitized, right? Where we're like, oh, a major world tragedy happened. Oh my God, I have a great joke about it. So, but I think there's a big difference between, okay, so if that's caught on tape and that's leaked, yeah, we look like callous, heartless bastards. But I think there's a difference between that and then like a private conference, like, Mel Gibson leaving an abusive voicemail. You know, that it's two different things.
If he had made it funny, that would have been okay.
It would have been more okay.
There were some funny moments in it.
It would have been. It would have been more okay. I honestly do think that there's, because if you look at Trumpgate with his whole
grab him by the pussy.
Grab him by the pussy. Yeah. Nothing about that. It was so arrogant. It was so entitled. It was so,
and the fact that he's done it. You know,
he's done
it.
He was saying, "I'm rich, I can do this," and
it's not just joking about it.
And there's nothing that they can do about it.
So is that part of you don't punch down? Is that part of
it.
You know what I mean? It goes into the comedy is funny when you punch up.
He wasn't joking.
Right.
He was showing off. So what I'm saying is there's a difference between.
But people did try to make that into, come on, it was a joke. It was locker room talk. It was dudes being funny,
That's
right?
What they tried.
Sure.
Would it have been funny if it sounded more like punching down and not punching up?
Well,
I don't think so, but I mean,
no, it wouldn't have been.
Like,
no.
if that was, I don't know.
Because how do you flip that? How do you spin that?
Well, if it was Dave saying he did it, we would be funny because no one would think women would let him.
Well, no,
it's still not funny.
It's intent and context, I
Yeah.
mean, if I was on stage at a club and I was doing it, I mean, I could say, well, I'm at a club and I'm on stage and I'm doing this and I'm playing a character on stage.
Context matters.
Of course it does, and a lot of people don't. And then that's the same thing with the Mike Ward and the Jeremy thing. It's like a lot of people don't want to consider, the context of it and the intent to do it. It's just at a certain point we started putting like George Carlin on the same level as like Walter Cronkite, of like some guy that we trust with to give us the news, but then some guy that just makes dick jokes. It's just like they're clearly not the same people. Why are we treating them the same? And I always have issue when people are talking about the punching up and punching down. It's like everybody wants to be treated equally until someone makes a joke about you, and then it's like, oh, you don't punch down, but I thought he wants to be treated just as everyone else is.
But it depends on what the joke is.
I know, but I mean, it's just, I don't have issue with, well, I mean, I know the Mike Ward joke is funny up to a point, and then it does kind of get ugly and goes a little bit overboard. But I mean, the initial joke is funny, but
he was making fun of a boy with a disability
that he did a benefit for.
He did a benefit for him. The boy had been part of the Make-A-Wish Foundation. He'd gotten to sing for the Pope, and the joke was that Mike Ward said, I donated all this money to the kid, and then he didn't die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not
breach of contract.
Right, and he said it was a breach of contract, and he shouldn't. And the boy, who has since gone on to become famous, sued him in front of the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, saying that.
To be fair, that wasn't the whole joke.
No.
Like the joke went on
the main
about his
part of it,
looks and about all that kind of stuff.
It was a vicious joke.
Yeah,
I don't
it got really mean. So it's like, and which, by the way, I still don't think it's a human rights case. I still don't think, but it's also
you
that
can hate
sounds
the joke and still defend the principle behind it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And so just the way the brief explanation you just gave made it sound really innocuous. Right? And
Fair
so
enough.
it's like
I'm offended that you've made it.
I'm offended that you didn't properly explain how offensive it was. No, but it went more than that.
Yeah.
Still, it shouldn't be where it is now.
But
that was so saying breach of contract. That's a funny joke. Once he started getting into making fun of how the kid looks, which is a result of having this disease, that's when he started punching down.
I 100% agree with you, but I also just find it. It did go overboard. But the initial joke, I'm fine with. But I also think once you're a public figure, you're you're open to criticism. And at what point do we get to choose? I only want good criticism. I don't want any bad stuff. I don't want that to be. It's
Well,
just,
now
you're a public figure, and it's easy
But the
not to
public
be.
figure thing can go two ways, because and I'm devil's advocating here because I do agree with you, except for he was a public figure because he was a dying kid who sang for the Pope, right? It's not like, and he was not good.
Yeah.
So it's not like he was embarking on. He didn't go on.
Not good.
No, he was.
No, he
Like,
wasn't. Would he have sung for the Pope if he wasn't dying?
I love
Yes.
him, but he was. It was not great.
We're not
It's-
talking about
it's not
Ryan White being the figure of AIDS who became a public figure.
Right.
Yeah,
That
it's
kid
not
could
like he
sing.
went on Canadian Idol, R.I.P.
Right.
It's not like he went on a singing show,
Right.
right? His public. he's only a public figure because
He was sick.
Yeah.
and his wish was weird.
Well, and also,
Who wants to sing for the Pope? What kid is like, that's my You can meet anyone in the world. He's like, oh, I want to sing for the Pope. Really?
He's
That's
not in this for the
weird.
chicks.
I'm a closet Catholic.
Well,
he's in this for the Pope. Come on.
Now, okay, but all of this, talking about that and people taking offense and how the audience, this goes back to what Greg had said way back in the beginning, and we talked about audiences deciding to tell you what you should or shouldn't do. You know, democracy be damned.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Now you are one of the least offensive comedians I know. I've seen everyone in here perform before, and I can say the two least offensive are these two. No, I honestly believe that.
I'm available for corp work. Having a Christmas party, need a few laughs the right way.
I'm available for corporate firings. For corporate fire, if you ever have to like fire 300 people all at once, I will show up to your place of business. I will fire everyone and do it all for you. Pack up your desks. See you later. Good night.
I say this with no qualms, being the least likable person in this room.
Give him a show.
You grease the right palm, sir. But the two gentlemen right here, I've seen you both, and you have the least offensive acts. Your act is one of the friendliest I've seen.
Some people don't think so.
Well, but that's just it. What on earth is it that they find so offensive?
Some people feel that they need to be the police officer, the hall monitor, and then you'll know, like I've done, there'll be some ethnic humor in my show. Go figure. So
because you know a lot of
then they feel like there's a
ethnic
need to police that. This woman said to me, like, well, it feels like you're having a laugh at your people's expense. And well, as soon as you say your people, I mean, that should be a huge flag right there.
Comedians?
Right?
Yeah.
No, this lady, this teacher
Nerds?
that cornered me in the corner. I couldn't
but
get
who are your
away.
people?
She was talking to me for 20 minutes. I couldn't get out. I was trapped. I wanted to gnaw off my own arm to get away.
What does she mean? Your people, black people?
Yeah, black people, yeah.
Really?
What did you think?
What?
Canadians.
Being offended on, for you.
What's that?
Being
Yes.
offended for some other group.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's exactly what I'm
but
talking
also
about.
being offended for someone who doesn't exist. Because she's
What do you
like,
mean black people don't exist?
no, this
How
woman-
dare you?
So this woman is
Now I'm
offended.
offended.
She's
Black lives
offended
matter.
because she's saying, well, Greg, it feels like you're making fun
Yeah.
of black people. So she feels like you might be hurting black people's feelings, but there is no evidence of that.
Right, because other
She's
black
not-
people are laughing.
Okay.
Yeah, and they didn't come up to her and say, could you, white lady, be our spokeswoman and go and speak to Greg?
Well, that's
And
what I
so
would
that's what
do.
I mean. She's offended on behalf of imaginary people.
Well, she would be higher up on the political chain, so I would definitely go to her.
I will tell you, for all the talk
What's that?
about political correctness, whether it is real or whether it isn't, or people who are offended or people who aren't, I will say this, and I really do mean this. No one is more offended in North America than white audiences. I have never seen more people who have decided to be offended on behalf of someone else than white audiences.
Yeah.
They are the worst.
Absolutely.
I have done jokes about black people in front of black audiences, only
Right?
to have a white person tell me it was wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Well, there's that
Yeah.
there's that classic comedy club scenario. If you were to do your black jokes and then the whole audience would just probably looks over at that one black table and is like,
Oh, that's
are
it,
they
yeah.
laughing? Oh, well, now I can too. That's the classic one of just like, is it okay with them? Okay, well now it's okay with me. But then
Well,
it's still,
it's constantly on TV when somebody does a joke about like a black person, for example, they cut to the black guy in
Yeah,
the
oh,
audience
yeah, they got you.
laughing.
I
so
can't
it's
wait.
like it's
I can't wait to
okay.
watch this show.
Yeah, it's
I'm going to be on camera a lot.
but they even did that at the
That's Greg Morton. That's Greg Morton
Every
right
reaction.
there.
Still laughing.
Comedian of color.
But
You
then
know, in my TV stand-up special, there's one joke where I say something about Asia, and it's one joke. I say something about China, and sure enough, that editor found the one Asian person in the audience and had
Yeah.
to cut to the picture of
Oh.
laughing, and it's not even a joke
Wow.
about. Race.
It's
Would have been
true.
funny if it was a clip of Jackie Chan laughing too, not even in the audience.
Oh my God, from like Rumble in the Bronx.
Yeah.
Just a clip from
Yeah,
Rush
from
Hour.
Rumble in the Bronx. Yeah.
Yeah, he's outside on a street,
Yeah.
but he's laughing.
Jackie
Yeah,
Chan
great.
loves it.
I think with everything, the pendulum, it has to go so far out of out of focus
Right.
Yeah.
before it swings back to being reasonable. For example, like of all the jokes I've ever posted, like on Facebook, the one I got the most heat for was during the Malaysian airline thing. It'd been 6 weeks into it.
Since the crash.
Everyone had done their jokes about the missing plane, right? Letterman, everybody, Leno, everybody. And then I just said, if it's weird how the plane's still lost, but all the luggage showed up. And this guy said, you know, like, I guess that new liver transplant didn't come with any humanity, and I was unfriended and blocked.
Yeah.
And I said, it's a simple joke about. I didn't say anything. So,
Yeah.
And also,
An airline luggage joke.
It
Yeah.
goes
Which is
overboard
obnoxious as
before
could
it
be.
comes back to being.
And these are members of the
reasonable, yeah.
media that criticized
Yeah.
you, right?
Yeah, everything.
I mean, that's ridiculous. They should.
So, you know.
Well,
But
maybe they
co-
shouldn't know.
But comedy's not something that never waits for all the facts to come out either. It's like if something happens and you can make a joke about it immediately, we do it.
Yeah.
No one goes, hey, let's wait until this whole thing simmers down.
But it's also-
then we can
yeah.
start
And
making
the joke about too soon. The whole reason we all make that joke is because it isn't too soon. It's
Right.
never too soon.
Yeah, no,
That's the whole reason we say that is because it isn't ever too soon.
Well,
See,
it's funny. It's like people make a joke about the Titanic, and I've heard crowds be, and it was like,
Ah.
what? I mean,
I've
It's
joke
been
about
100
Michael
years.
Jackson that
Yeah.
people flip out, and I'm like, no, half an hour before he died, you were calling him a child molester.
yeah.
That's where I
You don't
draw
get to
the
be
line,
offended now.
Michael Jackson. That's it.
Farrah Fawcett is safe. Farrah Fawcett is not too soon, but Michael Jackson, that was 15 minutes later.
Well, I always love the when Jared from Subway came out when he was discovered to have all the.
What are you
all
talking
the-
about?
I like how you said he came out.
Well, he did not.
The FBI made him.
Yeah.
There is a
He
closet
didn't come
for
out as a child molester.
No, they found his.
He was found
He
out
was
to be.
he was kind of pushed out. But I always loved that one. After that happened,
Get out of here. There's kids in here.
There was no moment of, hey, let's wait for all the facts to come out for Jared.
Yeah.
Everyone was immediately, no, he's a kid diddler. All of a sudden.
Well, let's be honest. That is the one. This has nothing to do with this topic, but that is the one crime in North America. You are guilty until proven more guilty.
Well, they still play Gary Glitter at every football game. So
Yeah, that is Gary Glitter's literally the only person that got out unscathed.
he's sacred.
Touche.
It is a good song.
I think it's very important, the getting back to the intent and
Yeah.
stuff,
Right.
because, you know, as most of us should know, that humor is a coping mechanism for traumatic
right.
experiences.
Sure.
So there's that aspect.
Well, I mean, you went through a liver transplant.
Well, yeah. So there,
right?
you know, there was humor that kept me
Within
going.
weeks of your liver transplant, I made a joke trying to offer you some wine. No, it's true. Do you remember? We saw each other. I mean, it must have only been about 8 weeks later I
You're a
saw
bad
you.
person,
And one of the
Lord.
first things I did was I said, well, it's time to put that to use. You know? And your reaction wasn't, you know.
I'm offended now.
I'm offended on Mike's behalf. That's not fun.
But, you know, for example, I remember one time I was in Los Angeles going to the Comedy Store, and it was the night of the Challenger. It blew up, right?
Yeah.
And a guy went on
Wow,
stage.
you're old.
and-
That's what I was
A
thinking.
guy went on stage and he said, well, you know, the teacher who was killed in the explosion.
Christy
he
McCullough.
goes- Yeah. He goes, there's one class that doesn't have to hand in their homework. And half the crowd went, nope, too soon. But his intent was just to make the guys in the back laugh.
Sure.
Yeah.
He had no response.
Oh,
you know
yeah,
what I mean?
sometimes
He
it's
was
not about the
Yeah,
audience.
it's trying to have street cred with the guys in the back. And to me, it's like, well, you know, that's bull. That's,
Yeah.
you know.
Are you're not a back of the room kind of guy?
Well, you know, I'll tell that joke to if we're all hanging out, but for the audience, unsuspecting at the time, I
Well,
think it's
okay.
wrong.
I'm glad you said that because that's something I want to say. And we're talking about political correctness or what people view as political correctness. There is something, and in a second I want to get to how the audiences have changed over the years. And there's a reason for that. And you and I have talked about that a good bit. But let me say this about comedians. It's one thing that's always annoyed me about comics. It's when that comic will put pen to hand, or they will go online and they will bitch and they will complain and they will go, I can't believe the audience got offended. This is my freedom of speech. I can't believe they got offended. At this joke you wrote to be offensive. And that's one of the things that gets me. I say all the time, I have never said a joke on that stage that was offensive that I didn't know going in was going to be
Right.
offensive. This idea of so many comedians pretend to be shocked and so surprised. I can't believe that my raping an infant joke offended those people.
Those
Where I go,
infants.
there is
Yeah.
no way you didn't know that. And one of the biggest problems that bothers me when we have this argument, people go, oh, it's political correctness. I go, that's bullshit. You knew the response you were going to get. Then you got it, and you had the audacity to act shocked or somehow slighted that this was the response you got. There is no way you made a rape joke and didn't know that a good half of the audience was going to be appalled by that.
You can't take the ego out of the equation, right?
Right.
I mean, that's what it is,
But
really.
isn't
It's
there
ego
something
at
to be
that
said
point.
about that we know going in that we're going to get the response we get sometimes?
Well, there's always that moment of like, if you're looking at the audience and you're going through your act in your head and you're sort of like, well, those people are there, so I can't do this joke, or if those people are there, I can't do that joke. Then you probably know that that your jokes are probably not just jokes anymore. That you are going to offend people, and if then there's not enough funny in that joke for you to get away with it. Then maybe you got to decide, well, maybe I shouldn't do that joke anymore. If you're feeling guilty or if you're cautious about telling it, then it's not funny enough for you to get away with it.
But I think there is something to be said for there are some jokes and some comedians who write jokes where it's not as much about the punchline as it is about the shock value.
Yeah.
And so if you want to shock the audience, but you don't want them to full-blown get mad at you, you can't really get upset when they do get mad.
Right.
Right? Like you wanted to shock
Yeah.
them, and they just shocked in a way you didn't like.
Right, but I mean, you do come across the odd audience that you'll say something and they will sort of express their offensiveness, but then often they're not sure why they're offended, but they just heard a word or two. They're just like, wait a minute, let me scramble for and how I can figure out how I can be offended at that. Like there's one joke that I have where I take a shot. I talk about going to this strip club in a city, and it was a horrible dive, really terrible conditions at this strip club, and there's a girl on stage. And I just talk about it was so ironic that she's on stage dancing to Don't Stop Believing by Journey. I was like, have you seen where you worked? Obviously you have stopped believing. And then the tag to the joke is, I thought it was funny and I thought it was ironic. Not as ironic as getting your adopted Chinese baby to sing, I've been working on the railroad, but, and then the audience is shocked, and then I pause, I'm like,
Too soon?
now are you offended that I brought that up in the first place, or are you offended that we did that as a country? And then and then the audience is like, well, actually, I'm not sure why I am offended, because then you have to almost school the audience of just like, well, we actually did do that as a country, and so
Trigger words,
Well,
right? There's more trigger words
That's an
than
important
anything.
point, though.
What are you upset about?
Yeah, certain times you have to school the audience.
Yes.
I remember doing a benefit, and it was for battered women. They had a big banner behind me, Battered Women's Shelter, blah, blah, blah. And I went on and I did this joke about a guy, like I was at Kentucky Fried Chicken when it was closing. And the woman said, would you like some extra bread? We're gonna close and we're gonna throw it out, but if you want, and I said, oh, okay. As a married man, I saw that as a simple act of kindness. A single guy would see that as, hey, I'll be waiting for you outside when you get off. All of a sudden it's this, it cut to her in court going, did you or did you not give my client an extra piece of bread? Yes, but I was. No further questions. Have the jury reached a verdict? She was asking for it.
Yeah.
And that crowd went, and I said, really? Do you think I would come out here and cut my own throat? The joke is about how the justice system treats women in court. I thought I was preaching to the choir, and it was amazing. They all did like Edith Bunker takes, like, and then it was okay. Yeah. But sometimes you have to tell them, you have to tell them your intent.
I've schooled the audience where I say you can groan, you can boo, you can laugh. You can't do all three.
Yeah.
Audiences will do that. Where I've had where they'll go, no, and I go, no, you're not allowed to groan and laugh. Pick one, but you don't get to do both.
I mean, my intent when I do the thing about teaching your adopted Chinese baby to sing I'm working on the railroad, I mean, I do that to push buttons, but I also expect and I actually enjoy telling the audience, we did that as a country, so what are you upset about? I reminded you that, or that we did it in the first place.
I've watched you talk about
What's that?
being terrified of children. And I've watched audiences look at that as if to say, how dare you, where I go, you then make a point that look how many children are murdering people. And you've had people look, go, oh my God, and you go, they're killing us. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And yet you've had audiences be angry where you're just like, I'm just telling you the news up here.
I've had the people, okay, one time I did this song, a song parody. It was a satirical song about Obama because no one was no one was doing jokes about Obama. He's the first black president, we shouldn't go there. And everybody was being very politically correct.
And no one expected it from you.
Right, exactly. So I coach it with this song Candyman, which is such a sweet sounding song. And I'm going, who can take tomorrow, spend it all today? You know, who can look at all your handguns and take them all away? Can't, you know, Obama man, you know? And I would come in like that. And then at the end of the show, this woman goes, well, it wasn't even at the end of the show, it was at the end of the song. This woman goes, Obama man, that's it, I'm out of here. And she starts storming out, and even the black people were looking at it, they're going like, what? Like, what the hell? This is just a joke. What's the big problem here? And I've had to explain to people that it's our job as comedians that we're the court jester, and we get to pick at the king. That's our job. You should never take that away from us.
Right.
Yeah.
I think at our best, we're the emperor has no clothes.
Yeah.
Right.
That's us at our best, you know.
Now, we've talked about it from the comedian point of view, but we can't let the audience off the hook. Okay, we can't let the audience off the hook. As much as I say political correctness as a term in air quotes is a myth, and I do believe that. I do believe that. I think it's a scapegoat term. I think that people throw it around now to mean anything that bothers someone else.
Right.
And that's why it's become meaningless. You know, certain words phrases become meaningless after a while. Liberal became that for a long time. It became a liberal scapegoat for everything that wasn't what Republicans were doing at the time or whatever. It just became that's a liberal this, you know, liberal media or whatever. And I go, that just became everything that was critical of anything conservative. Political correctness has become a meaningless term for anything that offends anybody for any reason. But I'm not stupid. I do think that audiences get offended. But we have talked about this before. One of the most astute things I've ever heard you say is that the internet is a horrible place.
Well, it's just a license for people to be mean and awful and upset about everything.
But,
so what, like, just don't.
But that, I think, is what has changed. People say that audiences are becoming more easily offended now.
No, everyone has a voice. Social media makes everyone think, I have a voice, and it's important, because when I say stuff online, 100 people will try to debate me. Therefore, what I think is important, because these other strangers that don't have a life interact with me all the time. So I get to come up to you after your set, and I get to tell you what I think about it. And you have to act like it matters. I will say this, as sitting here, I've realized that I don't offend people a lot with my comedy in terms necessarily of, there's really one group that I offend, and that's men that don't want women to talk, right? So no one comes up to me after the show and goes, oh, I didn't like the joke you did about Obama, or I don't like the joke you did. I have men come up to me after and go, you're disgusting. I had a guy once tell me I turned him gay. I was like,
How?
because I told gross jokes from a lady perspective about sexing.
All from a comedy show.
What?
Normally you have to date her for a year.
Honestly, right? Yeah. It's, I don't date gay men anymore. It's the new rule. But,
You don't want to turn them straight?
so, well, I don't have that power, Dave. It only goes one way.
Okay.
But you're right. It's people feel they have a voice now. When if you look at, I mean, and Mike, you came up in what's known as the boom, right? The comedy boom in the 80s, where comedy was everywhere. It was on TV everywhere. And it paid for your house and your car and your liver. Well,
it's getting drunk on the memories.
Yeah. Now he wishes he didn't have the liver.
But see, now let's go back in time. Okay, so Al says something, or Greg says something, any of us say anything right now on stage, someone's offended by it, you know, it's point, click, and it's online, and 1,000 people see it. In your heyday, during the boom, someone didn't like you, they had to take pen to paper
Yeah.
Write a letter.
and write a letter to
And
the
figure
editor.
out how to get the letter to you or to somewhere you would see it.
Right, and then
Yeah.
maybe it would get into the right hands of the right person, or they had to pick it in front of a comedy club and get other people to pick it and hand out flyers. And being offended took effort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
And you gave up in the middle.
Right. Yeah.
By the time you found a pen and a random piece of paper, you were like, you know what, I'm just gonna watch TV.
I
don't
miss
care."
those
you-
days.
you can-
Being offended now is just a change.org petition.
Right, you can send out an angry tweet before you can even say, I don't really give a shit, you know.
Yeah.
It's like now, like back, you'd get halfway, what's this? But now it's funny. I don't know. I rarely get someone coming up because I'm A, not very approachable after a show, but B,
I
it's,
hide. I'm not coming
No, no,
out.
no, that's actually true. Al and I have done numerous shows together, and she'd rather not be there at the end of the show to greet people.
You don't meet your public?
No, because a lot of the times I don't want to hear what they have to say.
It depends on how the show goes.
Sometimes it's great.
If it's okay, then yeah.
Just hanging out by the door.
Yeah.
I get them to hold up a card first. It was, green card? Okay, come on over.
Women get, or I shouldn't speak for all women, but I would say for myself, I get, because sometimes it's great and people just go, oh, great show. I go, oh, thank you, that's so nice. Sometimes, especially if you do jokes about sex, then you get a guy come up and that goes, yeah, you know what? I'd like to see your whatever. And it's like, no, get out of here. It wasn't an invitation. So there's that group of men that think if a woman talks about sex on stage, now we're inviting every man to come up with his sex talk.
So
And then there's some men who are also like, you turned me gay. And then it's like, well, I'm not dealing with you.
I think he was just looking for a way to just be gay.
Yeah, no, I think he was too.
So are people
and I
more
set him
easily
free.
offended, or do they just have an easier outlet where it spreads faster and louder quicker?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think
And you know what? There's
No,
no
I think
filter
it's-
anymore either.
There's no
People don't have a filter.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Fuck you, no.
manners isn't a big thing anymore. People don't pride themselves on that.
Right?
There's the immediacy, so you don't have to think about what you're saying before you say it. You just tweet, yeah, Mike MacDonald, you're old, shut up. Or
Hey, that's my tweet.
I plagiarized it. But yeah, so it's and everyone thinks that their feelings and their opinion are the most important.
Well, it's also
So
funny.
we talk about the pendulum. Sorry, Dave. We talk about the pendulum. You said that it swings back, it swings. Right now, it is swung in this way where people think that everyone is easily offended and everyone is too politically correct. So let me ask you: are we stuck there for a while? Oh no. Or is that pendulum about to swing far, far back the other way and no holds barred?
It's definitely swinging back.
Think so?
I think so. There's a revolution. Trump, I'll point to Trump right now. I think that's.
He's given people license to say terrible things.
He's the
And
same
I
way,
think, yeah,
right?
that
In the
will-
same way that Bush emboldened stupid people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
there's going to be less of a. We're already hearing it. We're already hearing people getting mad at the concept of people not wanting to hear about other people being offended.
It's just, I also find it interesting when people actually are having when they consider that the going back and forth with someone online, whether it's like, so someone posted something on Facebook and then people are going back and forth at each other, that's not really, people refer to that as a discussion or as an argument, but it's not. It's just a series of monologues. If you can close your computer and walk away, you're not having a discussion with anyone. You're just throwing shit out there and then someone will throw it back. But it's like the idea of online bullying. I know that's a thing, but in the old, back in the day when people would call each other, in the 80s when John Hughes movies and everyone was calling each other fag and stuff like that, it's just sort of like when a traditional bully would be the person that would actually, I'd shove Greg and I'd get off on Greg, the hurt that I would see in his face. But online bullying, it's sort of like I say something mean, but if the other person just closes their computer and walks away, that's not really bullying anymore. You're just kind of throwing stuff out there and hoping that that person responds.
Yeah, and almost no one closes their computer and walks away.
Right, because they still want to be a part of it, and it's that.
And also,
Mike MacDonald, last word.
it's everybody else that picks up on it. The real bullying, like for the Mike Ward thing, wasn't so much the joke, it was the reactions that this kid got because of the joke.
Yeah.
Right.
But there was no responsibility on the people who bullied this kid off stage.
Well, and all the newspapers that reprinted the joke too was just sort of like, how
Every-
much did they help in this kid getting bullied as well? I mean, the newspapers could have been like, well, we're not going to reprint that joke, or we're going to make it hard for you to find out even what the joke is. But they reprinted it, and other people saw it, and then that became it blew up like that.
It'll be interesting to see if that pendulum does swing back, and if we get past this thing. For the time being, as usual, when it comes to political correctness, I don't think that we came to a consensus. But thank you anyway, and give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you for being here. That's it for today. I want to thank Mike MacDonald for being here.
Cool.
Give yourself a round of applause. Allison Dore, Greg Morton, and that's Dave Martin. And as always, when the show is over, we hope you join us off stage. Thanks a lot. Good night.